welcome. Thank you for the organisers, Eve and his colleagues, for inviting me here. As explained, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of diamonds. I've got half an hour to cover 2,500 years, so it's going to be fairly quick, but I'll do my best. How do I actually change slides? Is it there? Oh. Yeah, that's it. Okay, you're all involved in the diamond industry somehow or other, so you'll recognize this. This is diamond mining. It might have changed a little bit, I suppose, over the years. But in theory here, you see these two guys cutting a piece of meat in half. And behind is a valley. And in the valley, some nasty snakes. Also in the valley are diamonds. But you couldn't go and get the diamonds because of the snakes in it. So what they did is they threw meat into the valley. Birds, you can see one up the top there, birds would come down, pick up the meat, carry it back to their nests, and there'd be diamonds sticking on the meat. They would go and climb up to the nests and rescue your diamonds. So this is how they thought in medieval times. This is where diamonds came from. This is how they were mined. This is another view of the same thing. This is from an early edition of one of Marco Polo's works. And this again, you can see there's guys carrying these big lumps of meat, a little bit close to the nasty snakes. But what's interesting here, you see the person on the right in the river. He's not having a bath because Marco Polo, when he travels and he wrote up about his travels, he explained how diamonds are found in river valleys and sometimes actually in the rivers. And what we have here is the earliest representation of alluvial diamond mining, which is quite interesting. So this is a representation from the sort of 1470s, 1500s. This is what a diamond looks like. We all know this. An octahedral crystal, very nice one. Now, in theory, this would have been noticed by people of any period in a riverbed, wouldn't it? I mean, it's a small, sparkling little stone. But the earliest use of diamonds were not decorative. They were for industrial purposes. That might seem strange to say that, but by about 500 BC, they were using diamonds to drill hard stone beads. And they've worked this out because this is a mold taken from a drill hole in an early bead, and by looking at the kind of tool marks, they can tell what sort of drill was used. So they know that little chips of diamonds were being used by about 500 BC to drill other stones and to help with engraving. This is a beautiful Greek gem showing a guy in a chariot. But I don't know if you can see, I don't think this has a pointer on it, but the very, very thin lines, the reins of the chariot horses, they're scratched with a diamond point. It was the best way of cutting fine lines on the diamonds. And here's a gem. This is in Berlin, in the museum in Berlin, and it's sort of at the starting point of a sort of four-sided engraved stone from about 150 BC, and it's been scratched out using a point of a diamond to show where they then are going to engrave the design in it. The earliest diamonds actually in jewellery used as a gemstone that I know of is this. This is a ring actually found in the far north of what is now Afghanistan, a site called Ai-Khanoum. And Ai-Khanoum was actually founded by Alexander the Great. You all know Alexander the Great set off from Greece, headed across and got as far as, well, the borders of India and up into Afghanistan. He founded this city, and this ring was excavated here in the 1990s. And it's got a ruby, or you might want to call it a pink sapphire, in the middle, and two little diamond crystals on each side. The style of the ring is completely Greek. It's a typical Hellenistic Greek ring of about 300 BC. So this is the earliest diamond jewellery that I know of. We don't see diamonds in Europe so far until a little bit later. This is a ring that was excavated a few years ago just south of Rome. So it's very pretty, it's a very small little ring set with a little diamond crystal. They couldn't cut the diamonds, so they set them as the crystals. This is about 150 AD and was found in the tomb of quite a young girl. Another example here, this is a ring in the British Museum, a diamond ring. And you can see it is the natural surface of the diamond. There's no cutting or polishing. And this is another Roman diamond ring, later. This is about 300, 400 AD. This is a large brown diamond, about 7 carats. Again, totally uncut. It's actually twinned crystals, if there are any gemologists in the room, twinned crystals of brown diamonds. And this is the biggest mistake of my life. This was shown to me in the 1970s by a dealer in London. And he said, "What do you think of this Roman topaz ring?" And what I said is, I don't think it's a topaz, I think it's a diamond. What should I have said? How much? Anyway, it's now apparently it's been valued at about £1 million now. I think I could have bought it for £450, but that's my biggest regret in the old days. We get a few diamonds later on, but not so much in the Mediterranean or European world after the Roman period. This is from India, probably an earring, again, pinky purple sapphires, an emerald, and I think 3, 4 little diamonds in it as well. Then once we get into the sort of the medieval period, properly the late medieval period, the sort of 13th, 14th centuries, we start to see diamonds in some numbers. These are 3 medieval rings, European medieval rings, of about the 14th century. And a famous piece, which you have here in Munich, this is the so-called crown of Princess Blanche that's in the residence in Munich. If you haven't been to the residence, to the museum there, and looked at the incredible gem treasures they have, go. Forget this show. Go and see real amazing jewellery in the residence. It's quite incredible. But this crown, this is actually English. It was given by Henry IV of England as a dowry present to his daughter, who married into the royal family in Bulgaria. So we want it back. But in the middle of these little clusters on the crown, little diamonds. Small ones, but they are there. We even have a representation. This is from the Church of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. This is in the Czech Republic. And it shows a gift. It's the King Charles IV, this is of what is now Czech Republic, and is receiving a diamond crystal. We don't know who he's getting it from, unfortunately. There's not a text. But if you zoom in, you can see it is actually a little diamond crystal, octahedral diamond crystal. And we actually might have the diamond. This is a reliquary. It's a nail from a cross, from the so-called cross. It has what they believed was a nail from the cross, encased in gold, with a little diamond on the end. And this was given by Charles IV to the Treasury, St. Vitus Treasury. So it's a good chance that this is the diamond that we see being handed over in the wall painting, which is rather nice. This is a 15th century ring that came into an auction in London a few years ago. Doesn't look very exciting. It is a little diamond, a bit worn. But if we look at the stone, on one side, the stone has been polished. I think you can see on one side, the angle changes halfway down the face. So it's not perfectly polished. So this is the beginning now, by the 15th century, we see signs of diamond cutting. You get a little bit earlier, we might have it in the 13th century, in the 14th century, early diamond polishing. But diamonds are terribly difficult things to polish, as you all know. Not easy, it only can be polished with diamond powder. And producing diamond powder is a problem. You've got to have quite a lot of diamonds to sacrifice. And you've also got to be able to recover the diamond powder after you've crushed it, which is not easy with sort of early stuff. Early gem cutting was one of 2 ways. In Europe, it was a matter, on the left, of rubbing a stone on a flat, smooth surface with abrasive, as you see here. Whereas in India, in the East, they're using a revolving wheel, powered by what we call a bow drill. It's like a lathe, and you have this sort of thing you pull backwards and forwards, and it makes the wheel go around. Now, there are problems here with diamond cutting. First of all, you need quite a lot of diamond powder to make them work. And secondly, you can't get nice little facets if you're trying to rub a stone on a flat block. It's too slow, it's impossible to keep it absolutely perfectly still. And with a wheel that's going backwards and forwards, because it's a bow drill, so it's going backwards and forwards, you can't get enough speed in one direction. And you just get this jerky backwards and forwards movement, so you can't really cut diamonds. People have tried as an experiment, and someone said it took them more than a week to get one facet on a diamond using this technique. Not easy. But then once we get to the 15th century, we start to see more cut diamonds, and we even have 2 illustrations of a diamond cutting or gem cutting machine. This is one of them. This is from about 1400, 1450, and it's not easy to work out what's going on there. But this is a reconstruction I did, it's just a 3D graphic reconstruction of it. So you have like a bicycle pedal, which you turn. So the big wheel turns, and the rope goes up and around the smaller wheel at the top. So the top plate goes round and round, and so it's continuous rotary motion. And this idea of what we call a crank, like a bicycle pedal, and a big wheel driving a small wheel, this has been called one of the greatest technological innovations of the 15th century. It was a huge change, used for various things, but here we have it for stone cutting. This is an early representation. You can see in the background, almost in the center in the background, we have a diamond cutting wheel, and here it's turned by water power, which is something that we also get by the end of by about 1600. We get evidence for using water wheels to turn diamonds. And from India, we have a representation of Europeans cutting diamonds in India using one of these diamond cutting machines. This is from 1605. And we even get, this is just a modern, well, not modern, it's probably 18th century diamond cutting wheel. It's an iron wheel, cast iron wheel, which is traditional, used with diamond powder. So you start to see after the sort of beginning of the 16th century, from about 1500 onwards, you start seeing some quite elaborate cut diamonds. This is an amazing ring in St. Petersburg. It might look like a diamond crystal, but it's too pointed, it's too sharp, it's been polished. It's a crystal that's been improved, if you can use that word with gems safely. It's been improved. What the invention of diamond cutting did, it didn't just allow pretty shapes. It allowed them to use old broken fragments of diamonds. Diamonds that were previously just cleavage fragments of old diamonds from India, they had no real use. But once you could cut and polish them, you could do all sorts of things. For example, a brooch. This is just before 1600 AD. And they get some odd-shaped diamonds, which can be used. They're sort of cleavage fragments of diamonds that can have the faces polished to make them really quite attractive. And what came out of this was the first, if you like, sort of what I call modern type of jewellery cut, and that is the table cut. In essence, that's just an octahedral crystal with a top polished flat and all the faces polished nicely. This is a lovely example in London, in the Museum of London, and this dates to probably sometime just before 1650. Gorgeous ring, beautiful. So what it really is, it's just a diamond crystal polished down and the top cut off the top. I did say, I don't know if any of you read the blurb about what I was going to talk about, but I did say I'd mention diamond setting, because that is important now, because the way stones were set showed them off, especially once they were cut. They need to look their best. This is a part of a necklace, again in the Museum of London, about 1640, with a really nice little table-cut diamond stuck in the middle of it, and emeralds on each side. I took the diamond out. No, don't worry, I didn't. This is just another part of the same necklace with the diamond missing. And you can see behind the stone, there's this black substance. They used to set diamonds in an enclosed backing, but they used this black material that was a mixture of soot, black from a lamp, burnt ivory or something, black, mixed with the resin or gum. And they pushed the diamond into this and then burnished the gold around it. And it might seem strange to set a transparent diamond on black. It actually works very well because it's actually in contact with the back of the stone. It acts like a mirror. So it really reflects the light beautifully from the back of these stones. The next, as I did say this is a rush, didn't I? The next step was to, if you like, sort of make the table cut a bit more fancy, make it more glittery. And they did this just by adding a few facets on the corners. This is the beginning of the brilliant cut, which is the main cut right into modern times. And one of the earliest of these brilliant cut stones is, of course, this guy. This is a famous diamond. It was brought back to London by Sir William Pitt, and he had it cut in London. A lot of diamond cutting was being done in London. This is about 1706, about that date. London was the main diamond cutting centre in the 17th century. It's interesting because it was about over 400 carats when it came from India as a rough stone, and it ended up as just under 141 carats. So it lost a huge amount of weight in the cutting, which is very upsetting to Sir William Pitt. But this is it. The stone is now in Paris, in the Louvre, because it ended up, the Pitt, they wanted to sell it, but nobody, the English crown didn't want to buy it, they didn't have the money for it, so it ended up coming into France, to the royal family in France. It's now in the Louvre. It's now called the Regent diamond. It was called the Pitt diamond, then it became the Regent diamond. So this is one of the earliest, what I call true brilliant cuts. It's more of a cushion shape to the modern one, but then it involved less wastage from an octahedral crystal. Obviously, you're trying to make a round stone out of a square crystal, you're going to lose an awful lot of diamond. And this, of course, the brilliant cut, is almost where this lecture can end, because this is what we still have today. But a little bit more about setting. They still set brilliant cuts on an enclosed backing. And this is a brooch of about 1760 in the Victoria and Albert Museum, and another one here about the same date. And I think you can see that the back of the stones on the right there, they're enclosed back still. So even though they're brilliant cuts, they're in enclosed backs. And they started to do some open backs in the 1800s, but it's really only in the early 1900s it becomes common to have an open back setting. These settings, I don't know if you can see them, but they're what they call a cut-down setting. You might have heard that term. It's certainly used a lot with antique jewellery. A cut-down setting. And it is literally cut down. This is just a drawing of how it was done. You cut down to leave the claws standing up. You see what I mean? It's not just one piece of gold or silver. I think this is silver here. Supposed to be cut down. It's not claws or prongs soldered onto a setting. They're actually produced by cutting down the gold to leave them there. The next step, this could be both open back and closed back setting, but the next thing, of course, was this open back setting. And this is a detail of a 19th century diamond brooch, quite a nice example, they're mostly forms of brilliant cut diamonds of very irregular shapes compared to modern ones. But if you look at the back, you can see it's open back setting. And this becomes normal through the 19th century and into modern times. What you might have noticed, does that go back? The front is silver, the back is gold. And this is typical right through the 19th century and even through much of the 20th century. The diamonds are set in silver, or a silver alloy, sometimes it's silver gold or other things, alloy, with a gold back. And it's usually explained that they put a gold back on because that wouldn't stain clothing, whereas silver could. I'm not sure that's true, because they have an awful lot of all-silver jewellery before that. And I mean, silver buttons were common even on military uniforms, white military uniforms. So I think possibly the thing was that silver jewellery wasn't considered valuable. So they put gold on the back to make it seem more important. I thought I'd just explain how this type of setting was made, because it's incredibly common. And a lot of people don't realize the amount of work that went in to set a piece like this. You started off, you had two pieces. This is just one little detail of one little piece of a large ornament. So you have silver and gold. According to one description, I mean, different goldsmiths might have done it in different ways, but according to one description, you started off by drilling holes in the silver of the size of the diamonds you've got. So the hole was made really to take the diamond that you have laid out. That was then soldered onto the gold, and then it was turned over and the gold cut and drilled out from behind. You then pop the diamonds in, and then with an engraving tool, you push down, you dig out the silver around the stones, at the same time pushing up claws or prongs on the stones. So you end up something like this, holding the stones in. And this is very typical for 19th century jewellery. But you look at an antique piece, whether it's a ring or a tiara, and you see all these diamonds, you think of the time that took to produce by hand. It's quite extraordinary, the amount of craftsmanship and time that went into these things. And then, of course, once you get into the middle of the 19th century, you begin to see a new metal coming into this. This is the prime example. This is a peacock feather brooch made by Tiffany. It was set with this large brown diamond that had come from the Duke of Brunswick's collection. Beautiful big brown diamonds. This was made in 1876 and shown at the Centennial Exhibition, 100 years after the American independence. This was shown in the Centennial exhibition. What's remarkable about this brooch is the white metal is platinum. This is the beginning of platinum jewellery. I know there's a kind of general view that platinum was invented by Cartier and is a 20th century thing. There's actually more and more 19th century platinum jewellery appearing. Once people know it's out there, I have a few antique dealers now say, I've just found another piece. So what was once incredibly rare is now getting more common because they're seeing. I mean, by the 1870s, this is an 1878 ad, you could actually buy from suppliers ready-made platinum settings or gold and platinum settings, gold settings with platinum claws, because platinum was too difficult for the average jeweler to work. So they could buy ready-made settings in platinum or platinum gold to create their own jewellery. This is was from the 1870s. And one thing, I must show you this because it's quite funny. This is a tiara, also made by Tiffany's in New York. And this was made from an opera singer called Lilian Nordica. It was made in the sort of late 1800s. I've got the date somewhere. I can't remember exactly when it was. In the sort of 1890s. And her fans, they'd call them today, put in some money to buy her this beautiful diamond tiara set in platinum diamonds, which Tiffany made. She was very proud of this and wore it all the time. And this photograph became very famous for an unexpected reason. It was used in a Coca-Cola advertisement. This is, I think, the first sort of celebrity endorsement. You have this opera singer, famous opera singer, in the Coca-Cola advertisement, and they probably didn't realize they were actually showing the Tiffany platinum and diamond tiara in Coca-Cola advertisement. I showed this to the person who runs the archive at Tiffany in New York, and they never knew of this, so they were quite excited about it. It's quite fun. And of course, it goes on. This is a brooch in the Victorian Albert Museum, a platinum front. This is around 1900, a little bit earlier, 1890s. This is made by, well, let's say it was sold by Tiffany's in New York, but it was designed by Lalique. Exactly the relationship, we don't know. And there's another example I've seen recently of a piece with a Lalique mark on it, sold by Tiffany. So I think quite often these sort of the big houses, if you like, the big names, were actually selling things between themselves or getting somebody else to sell them. And of course, the big change in the 19th century with diamonds was South Africa. In antiquity, diamonds came from India, not that many of them. Then from about 1720, they started to come from Brazil, more of them, but not a huge number. And then in the last half of the 19th century, container loads coming in from Africa. It completely changed the market. When they discovered diamonds in Brazil, the price dropped in Europe enormously. The diamond dealers couldn't sell their diamonds. Price went like that. It recovered fairly quickly, but dropped. Everyone was frightened it was going to do the same thing with the South Africa, but a new customer came along. And that customer was North America. Because this was the period of all the new big industrialists, the railroad people and everything else. So there's suddenly this whole new market for diamonds. And this vast amount coming from South Africa, mainly via London into America, didn't affect the price so much. Because I say they hit thing and went off to America. This is a sort of typical early scene of diamond mining in the 19th century. Not a very pleasant occupation. But it was a huge endeavor. And this is when sort of diamond mining became a seriously large scale. So once we get into the sort of beginning of the 20th century, diamonds are king, the brilliant diamond is king, and platinum is often king as well. This is by Cartier, about 1903. There have been a few changes since then, of course. The most important one was they learned how to cut diamonds with a saw. The sawing became much more efficient and fast and cheap. So in the old days, from one octahedral crystal, you could get one fairly deep, brilliant cut. When you could cut it in half and you get two brilliants from one stone. So this completely changed the economics, of course. You can now get two from one bit of rough. And I think it changed the proportions of the diamonds, but they marketed that in a very positive way, that this was a good thing because the light reflected better. So anyway, the new cut came in. And also you could do things like the baguette cut, which came in by about 1920. We start to see baguette diamonds. Not much before that. There's some possibility, there's a few from about 1815, but generally baguette is 1820 or later. So, sorry, 1920 or later. So if you start seeing, as you will see, Victorian brooches on the internet set with baguettes, they got it wrong. Now, of course, you have hundreds of different diamond cuts. I mean, you name it. And I mean, diamond cuts have become a proprietary thing. Someone invents their own diamond cut and markets it as a trademark cut. That's changed. So that's a huge change, really, in the last generation. And then, of course, the biggest change is what you came into the last conversation you just had here, synthetics. I mean, huge quantities. I mean, as the Hong Kong show going around, they have a whole, like a warehouse, a whole hall just for lab-grown diamonds. It's not just the odd booth. And I mean, acres of the things. And the Chinese manufacturer were telling me, we have two production facilities, we're building 2 more, and they can each produce 450,000 carats a month. I mean, the numbers are unbelievable. And one guy was selling, you get a brilliant cut synthetic for $150, a 2-carat synthetic brilliant cut for $250, and a 3-carat synthetic diamond cut for $350. And it went on. I think they were going up to about 5 or 6 carats. So, I mean, it is a huge market. How you deal with it's up to you lot. I'm not in retail and supply. I'm not involved in the industry. But they say as long as the customer knows what they're getting. But it is a game changer, as we've found. So we've come a long, long way, if you think, in the 2,000 years and a bit of diamond history. It's been a long way, but it's been an interesting journey. Whether diamonds have lost some of their romance and magic along the way, that's up to you to decide, I guess. But it's a long history. It's an interesting one. If you want to learn more, there's the book that was mentioned, Diamonds, An Early History of the King of Gems. It now appears to be out of press. This is the Yale University Press book from 2018. I think it's out of press because nobody seems to have it now, even Yale on their own website. So it might have sold out. They haven't mentioned a reprint. But anyway, that's the sort of the one history for you if you can find it. So that's really the end. It's been a long and interesting history. And so most of you are part of it now, aren't you, if you're dealing with diamonds in any way? So you're continuing what is a very long and old tradition. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Jack. Any questions? Oh, quite a few questions, actually.
Thank you. That's very, very interesting. Can I just ask one question? So, when you say the modern brilliant cut came in the early 1600s,
yes,
or the beginning of,
the end of the 1600s, brilliant, the modern style, yes.
So nowadays, when I source a diamond, there's a difference between an old cut diamond and a brilliant cut.
Yes.
So was that what you're saying?
An old cut is just an old brilliant.
Okay, to me it has less facets.
Well, you get old cut stones. Some of them have very few facets. You can have down to 16 facets. Some of them have more. Okay. I mean, but it's essentially an older form of brilliant.
Yes.
And a lot of people, I mean, most sort of what are called people who love diamonds actually prefer an old cut stone to a modern brilliant.
Yes.
And I think actually in modern lighting conditions, they're far nicer. Because if you think about it, all the sort of diamond grading and light return was all worked out on the basis of lighting we had a generation ago. You know, middle of the room, one light. Now, most living rooms have dozens of LEDs or whatever around it, and I think it's very different. So I think old cut stones do look much nicer. 20 years ago, they were recutting old cuts into modern brilliants. Now they're recutting some brilliants into old cuts. And indeed, there are some cases apparently where they're cutting synthetics, as well as CZ and moissanite, into old cut diamonds. And people aren't spotting these, because they take a real old cut large diamond out of a brooch, replace it with say a CZ or a moissanite or perhaps synthetic diamond, cut in an old cut, and people just assume it must be an old stone. So it's a nice little scam going on.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jack. Thanks very much for the talk. It was really very interesting. I was just wondering how much is known about the individuals that would have cut the stones, say, and I know it's a long time span, whatever, but say a Victorian person that cut diamonds? Would he have been, what was his social status like? Was it well paid? Was it
It changed. I mean, we don't know many individual names. A few famous ones, people like Morse in New York, 100 years, 150 years ago. There are a few names we know. We do know a few names from earlier times, but they're usually because of legal problems. For example, there's a guy called Hannibal Gammon in London who had a workshop, and actually a Dutch person cutting diamonds for him, and they, let's say, receiving stolen diamonds and recutting them. So the names come out and that sort of thing. But generally, they're not named. And, all the credit goes to the name on the door, and the people getting their hands dirty at the back remain nameless, which is true today to a large extent, yes. So very few actual names. Sorry.
No, thank you.